Hello, everyone. Today's webinar topic is Ceph RBD, backup and recovery. We recently covered topic around the Ceph itself, and we know that Ceph in general is a hard-to-kill platform that basically you need to be quite creative when it comes to losing data when deploying Ceph. But in general, because Ceph is gaining more and more popularity, you have to also consider the other end of Ceph. So let's say user itself. User is going probably find some way to kill your data. So in general, we are going to focus on Ceph support in vProtect. Well, we cover multiple platforms. We started with virtual environments, so Ceph is commonly used in these platforms, but we want to support also Ceph environments when it is not in the context of virtualization platform. So in this picture, you can see that we cover a wide variety of platforms. Some of them, they already have Ceph support built into them, and we support such configurations from vProtect perspective. You can name a few, like let's say it is the OpenStack environment. Ceph is commonly used in there. OpenShift or Kubernetes, Ceph is becoming more and more popular among these deployments as well. But what about the others? Well, proxmox definitely supports Ceph as well. We don't have proper support from the proxmox perspective for Ceph yet, but still you could use our new approach. So it means storage providers. Now, in general, vProtect provides several main features focus on the, let's say, VM level, container level, storage level, and we always try to push agentless approach to these new areas when we talk about data protection. It's not only about backup, it's also snapshot management capability. For some custom deployments, we also support application backup, so it's a generic mechanism that you could, let's say, implement whenever you need to cover specific applications in your environment. And with these storage providers, we just cover an additional branch of the sources. So it's not only about snapshotting the virtual machine, it's rather about snapshotting and exporting data from, well, let's say storage provider. It's an abstract term. In Ceph case, it is going to be RBD volume, but we also support plain file system, which is pretty cool thing, especially about the regular generic approach to cover multiple different types of the file systems mounted on a node, and Nutanix Files, which is a solution to create shares for file servers and shares in Nutanix environments. So the list is going to grow in the future. Today's topic is Ceph RBD. When we talk about Ceph RBD data protection, you have to be aware that vProtect in general supports multiple different backup providers. So the same what I have said about the sources, we are in the middle, and you can later push these backups to multiple targets whenever you would like to store your data. Especially quite popular is just a plain file system, which also can come with the duplication built in or replication mechanisms. It's always up to you, whatever file system you choose. It can be an object storage, especially S3 compatible, another cool area of not only off-prem storage, which is served on the cloud, but also on-prem solutions where you just basically scale up with your object storage locally. And finally, which is also cool, enterprise-grade backup providers. So you can think about using your existing legacy backup providers and be still able to support data protection for Ceph in this case. So quite new technology, which is gaining popularity. Now, you may be still wondering, okay, but you can replicate Ceph in general, right? So why do we need backup at all? Well, First of all, yes, you can replicate, but it is going to replicate your data problems as well. You can enhance that with the snapshotting capabilities, sort of to being able to roll back, but still it requires secondary cluster, secondary environment onto which you would replicate your data. So it may be just far more cheaper to use your existing storage, existing data protection solution with the duplication mechanisms to deliver slightly different approach. In this case, basically extending capabilities of whatever you have and using vProtect to properly create backups of your volumes. Now, in general, storage providers, we aim to cover, again, in agentless way. So it's not like in the many virtualization platforms where you could consider installation inside such environment. It's not working like this. At least none of the providers that we support today requires such approach. Maybe you could think about file systems in general that we cover, that they require shares to be mounted on the node. But Ceph can reside somewhere outside. So we connect to the monitors, we grab the data and later push it to the backup destination. Remember, node is the component, is the data mover which handles the workload. Server is the component where all of the metadata are being managed, stored. So this is basically a brain of the solution. Now, storage providers have been introduced with the previous release. We have now version 4.2, which also enhances a few other aspects. So Ceph RBD volumes basically are going to be storage instances in the vProtect terminology. Storage provider in this case is your Ceph environment. So it is a set of monitors. Well, basically, the approach is quite similar to the virtual environments as you previously seen. So instead of having hypervisor or hypervisor manager, we are talking about storage provider. So some abstract term describing management or APIs of the storage that you would like to protect. Now, this feature tries to replicate what we have done for the virtual machines. So you have also the mounted backup approach. So you are able to later mount such backups, such snapshots of your Ceph RBD volumes on the node and have individual file restore capabilities. Because Ceph supports some way to track changes happening between snapshots, we also are able to do incremental backups, and we also are able to share such backups over iSCSI to some external clients. So the approach that we had for the virtual machines, so successfully implemented in many different customers, we have now tried to use the same approach for storage providers. Now, while file systems require to be mounted on the node, from the vProtect's perspective on the Ceph, we are going to have automatic mount of the, well, not mount, but direct transfer of the data from the Ceph itself. So inventory synchronization process is the very first step that you would like to invoke on your monitors. It's going to scan two things. First of all, it's going to scan for pools, and it's going to scan for volumes that basically are the RBD volumes that are present in each pool. So volume is going to correspond directly to a virtual machine instance, like the protected entity with the same views, with this charts, whatever you have, the details, and we have the context, like the pool is going to correspond sort of the hypervisor, I guess, in this case, in virtual environments world. You can have multiple volumes residing in a single pool, and provider corresponds somehow to the hypervisor manager. So inventory synchronization process, again, it's a task. It's collecting this information, And then we have the overall process, which looks like this. So you have the snapshots in the Ceph RBD of the Ceph RBD volume. The last snapshot is going to be kept for future incremental because we need to do later snapdiff option to find what has changed in your Ceph cluster. And we are always use for full, this is a regular RBD export, which is also cool because it's also going to be a sparse file without the empty blocks, while the incremental uses the snapdiff command to get necessary changes between the snapshots themselves, which means basically that we are going to later just read individual changes with the RBD NBD and grab necessary blocks only to from your Ceph without the need to export data again and then again. Well, result is a raw file, so it actually automatically enables few things in vProtect. So first of all, it's going to be file level restore, and the secondary is the option to share over iSCSI. Now, configuration from the Ceph perspective is quite similar to regular Ceph client configuration. So you need to provide the contents of two files. One is the keyring and one is the configuration. Especially this one is used to track which monitors we are going to connect. Well, for now, you can only assign a single node to do the job. So this is going to be enhanced in the future, but currently you need to select one and only one node to execute backups within your storage against the storage provider. Now, one notice that we supported Ceph for a while, and in the past, Ceph was rather behind the scenes, used in the mostly by the OpenStack environments, or KVM standalone as well. So you could provide credentials in this host. So we centralized this approach as well. Now you can define the multiple storage providers, especially Ceph ones, into the storage providers tab, and later you refer to them when using in conjunction with specific hypervisor or OpenStack environment. Cool thing about OpenStack is that now, because we have let's say you can define multiple storage providers, you could have separate storage clusters used for availability zones. So instead of having single cluster and single global configuration for the hypervisor manager, you can now go to the hypervisor clusters and then provide necessary details for each of the clusters individually. So basically you refer to these storage providers. Now, this is just the example of the admin keyring and the configuration context. So you just copy paste these two, and later notice that you have on the left the tab storage tab, which almost exactly reflects what we support for the virtual environment, especially including infrastructure tab. Keeping information about the storage providers and storage pools and instances, which is basically in this case corresponds to the volumes. Storage pools necessary, especially important later during the restore whenever you would like to recreate volume within the particular pool. It's just a secondary tab here in the storage infrastructure. Backup process. Exactly the same view. As I said before, we try to replicate these views as much as possible to keep the same look and feel. Now you can see that I can select full or incremental backups and store them in a specific backup destination, even for multiple storages if need. So how to use in general? So the approach is basically like this. You have an inventory synchronization process that is focused around the instances and pools It is also being done periodically. You create backup SLAs. Also, snapshot SLAs are possible, so you can have policies defined for your volumes. You can also have automatic assignments, but because it's not really, in Ceph, we couldn't find appropriate term to correspond to tags. Currently, it's only name-based only. So if you have a specific naming convention of your Ceph volumes, then we could automatically include such volumes into the backup SLA policies. Then you just run backup and restores as usual. That includes also ice sharing over iSCSI. So this basically at least concludes the part with the slide deck. Now let's switch to the live demo part. Okay, so now I can start with the live demo. So there was some echo temporarily, but let's continue. So the main dashboard of the vProtect has been enhanced with the storage aspects as well. So now not only virtual environments are, let's say, one entity that has been supported, but also the applications and the storage in general as well. All of these views are visible in the main dashboard, and you can browse through the different reporting capabilities here, especially related to the either virtual environment tab, storage tab, if you would like, and see specific backups that have been recently executed against the volumes. So we try to have dedicated views similar to what we had previously just for virtual environments. Now, usually you have multiple nodes, especially because you can mix together different sources with vProtect solutions. So you can imagine that you have a vProtect installation with multiple nodes, one dedicated for your Ceph, the other dedicated maybe for some OpenStack environment, yet another dedicated for the different environments that you have. It can be VMware, it can be Ref, etc. And now the nodes execute this task. So you can have multiple nodes. All of them are being assigned dynamically depending on your task and where the data needs to be stored. So you can map specific set of nodes to the individual backup destinations and input some limits so that, let's say, single node is not going to overwhelm, let's say, your specific environment. Now, either virtual environments, applications, or storage are going to be central place for your management activities. So starting with the storage, let's go to the infrastructure. I have several storage providers in here defined. Usually if you define Ceph RBD, as I mentioned before, you need to provide the name, keyring, and configuration file contents, which I already have defined for my environment. And you need to select node which is responsible for actions invoked against this specific storage provider. Now, once you run inventory synchronization, which also is being done automatically periodically, you see that it actually created a task in the console. So it is going to be executed, it connects to your monitors, it collects all of the necessary information from your Ceph environment, and it builds information inside this vProtect repository. Once you have it, you're going to see storage pools, which are present in your environment, as well instances, volume instances. Some of them may have already been removed. That is why we mark them as non-present in our table, still allowing you to restore backups if there are any for this particular volume. In storage instance list, you may see create button, but it is not related to the Ceph RBD because you scan, you build this inventory synchronization. It is only meant for file systems because you define them manually. But let's have a short walkthrough what you can actually see here in this view. So I have some volumes that I have recently backed up. Some of them have some policies assigned. Let's maybe go to this one. You can see that it has some basic details. I see that specific node is going to be responsible for backup this volume. It's going to, this one resides in the cube storage pool on this specific storage provider, and I'm able to run now the full backup, let's say, of my volume. So it again submits a task, which is export task. Export means basically that we are going to export data from the storage provider to the staging space and later push it to your backup provider. Notice that there is available setup in vProtect where you can share together staging space and the backup destination if it's file system. And this means that this store task, which you can now see in the console, well, haven't appeared yet, but previously you can notice that store task has been instantly created whenever backup has been invoked. It is going just to move data instead of copying it again. Especially important if you have multiple big volumes, you don't want to have double copy, but sometimes it is necessary if your external source, like let's say IBM Spectrum Protect, some object storage, some external storage in general, if it is if it needs to be basically moved, if we need to copy data over the wire. Now, whenever I invoke this command, you can notice that some statistics have also been updated. You can see some transfer rates, which you can see here, judging by the time and amount of data that we have successfully exported. So you can see also backup time, especially useful if you would like to track which phases have been taken more longer or shorter, and if you have any specific bottlenecks. Calendar on the right allows you also to filter data if necessary for the specific for specific range, which also filters out tables here to find easier backups that you need. Now, whenever you go with the restore process allows you either to restore back to the storage provider, which usually is the primary option for you, but sometimes you just would like to restore data as a plain raw volume on the node itself. So you can just provide the restore path and allow, in that case, to browse data locally and do whatever you'd need with this raw volume file. Whenever you import to the storage provider, you need to specify storage pools to which the volume needs to be created. Optional, you can provide the name of the storage, and if it already exists, you can optionally overwrite it. Well, overwrite basically means that we are going to remove volume that has conflicting name and create a new one and pump data into this newly created volume. Now, the mount capability, so file level restore, allows you to have the same options as you would have with virtual machines. It is common to have actually these volumes initialized like in the OpenStack environment already, and see all of these file systems if you are protecting these volumes separately from your OpenStack. But you can imagine that the same volumes can have some partition layout, etc., and you can restore individual files by mounting specific file systems on the node. So I have one already mounted. I can see that this particular has 1 gigabyte in size. I'm able to browse it, and I see some test files on this X4 file system, and these are ready to be downloaded directly from my user interface or from the node if I need to access thousands of the files, and the browser wouldn't be able to handle that easily. Notice that I have multiple backup destinations. As I said, it can be file system, object storage, and endpoint. Enterprise grade backup providers, especially Dell's or IBM's, which also is cool because you can use your existing infrastructure. And in the reporting tab, you notice that I'm able also to generate some specific advanced reporting based on which storage provider you're using, based on the pools. So how many backups from the specific pools have been created and occupy my space, especially important for the chargeback. I can see that I have two pools. One is significantly larger, occupies more space than the others in my backup destinations. And I can also filter out by backup destination or backup policies. So, okay, I'm focused on the cube, let's say VMs, but only limited, well, volumes, not VMs, but only limited to the specific backup destination. And that's pretty much it, I guess. Okay, backup policies maybe and snapshot SLAs, one more aspect, because backups is one thing. We create a snapshots and export data, but this data needs to be stored somewhere. With snapshot management, we create snapshots, as many as you would like. So let's say that this policy that I create here describes pretty much the number of versions, so number of snapshots, let's say 3 snapshots, and no longer than 4 days, which means that I'm going to have at most 4 snapshots created from this policy, optionally with additional snapshots used for the backup purposes. And the oldest one is going to be removed whenever one of these conditions is met. This works exactly like for the regular backup policy, so I can create regular expression rules to automatically assign my volumes to the policy. This is especially important if I have some naming convention, no tags at this point at least. And similarly to backups, I also have an option to specify multiple schedules. So in backup SLAs, I have a schedules tab. I can create multiple schedules, and later I can use it by several policies. So I can specify if it's going to be a full backup, if it's going to be interval based, maybe on a specific time. So imagine that your snapshot management could work, let's say, Monday to Friday between, let's say, 8 a.m. and the 5 p.m. maybe. So working hours. And I'm going to create snapshots every 2 hours. Well, the same type of schedule could be also used for backups, but usually whenever you create interval-based schedules, usually it's connected with snapshotting because you would like to have faster process in place whenever it is done so often. Okay, so that's pretty much what I had in general to demonstrate. Now it's time for Q&A session. So let's write your questions into the chat. Let me check. There should already be maybe some questions. If nobody, chat, or there is also a question tab. So you have 2 options. Especially maybe if you would like to share how big your clusters are, if you're using it just for OpenStack environments, or maybe you have other purposes like OpenShift or Kubernetes. Okay, so if there are no questions, you can find me, track me on the LinkedIn, browse our page, and stay tuned for another webcast.